Hi, it's Rebecca, and this is Metaphysical Monday. Welcome to Inner Power Training. Today, I want to talk about a very metaphysical topic, a spiritual awakening. Maybe you're going through one. It's always good to compare notes with people on the same plane. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you're interested in metaphysics. I've talked before about how I had this big aha moment when I had a spontaneous healing in my 20s after a diagnosis of cancer. But, the after effects of that experience were tremendous. And I just want to share some of them with you because I'm curious if you've had similar experiences after having an STE, a spiritually transformative experience, which is what I went through when I was just up against the wall. That's when it happens, when you've got nowhere to turn. And bingo, you surrender. You surrender to your higher self. You surrender to the divine. You become one with the universe. And it's an amazing feeling, but it's very natural in a way. When it happens, I began to think it happened to everybody. And I was just a late bloomer. I was in my mid 20s when it happened, but it was so transformative. I have to tell you some of the side effects from it. First of all, for 3 days, I walked around in an altered state, literally an altered state. And I wasn't a drug user at all. I've never been drawn to psychedelics. I never took acid or any of that stuff, even though I was living in the 60s, functioning in Greenwich Village, New York, San Francisco. I was in all the hot spots back then, but I was just more of an observer along those lines. Even though I had a lot of friends that were doing those kind of things and experiencing it, I was more on the natural, organic, spiritual path of trying to figure out how to find that inner peace. I knew there was a way to use my mind in a better way than what it was just operating at as kind of a crazy wild animal if you just let it do whatever it wants to do. I wanted to become more in control of my inner experience. So I set myself up with a bad diagnosis. Everything that happens to us, we create ourselves. And it was my greatest fear. It came upon me. And for 3 days after I had this awakening, I walked around in an altered state where everything was different, but it was very difficult for me to deal with three-dimensional humans like myself had, because I could just see where there was a lot of phoniness, a lot of mechanicalness in the three-dimensional world with the way humans operated. And I would try to connect and I would find myself having to flee. I couldn't stand to be around it. It was just so shocking to see through these games that we play. So I put my transfer in to get back to the East Coast, which I did. I needed to change my environment, even though I was living in the most beautiful place, Belvedere Island in Marin County, which is, right next door to Tiburon. I was up there on Bayview, and it was a beautiful place. But I just had to get back to the East Coast. I didn't feel comfortable anymore living in that environment because I needed a big change. So I transferred back to the East and lived in Massachusetts again. And everything started to really rearrange itself in my life. Another thing I noticed when I was reading passages in the Bible, certain passages would light up. I felt like there was a waterfall going right through my body. The core of my body felt like this beautiful waterfall was going in there and cleansing me. And it just happened spontaneously. It was a wonderful feeling. I remember I was talking one day to a Hawaiian steward on a layover in Chicago after this experience. And he said, Rebecca, there are sparks coming out of your eyes as you're telling me the stories about your spiritual healing. He could actually see sparks coming out of my eyes. I thought that was kind of interesting. He wasn't making that up. Now, there was also a spot in my eye. in my cornea that was always very noticeable. And right after this awakening, I looked in the mirror and that fleck that was darker than the rest of my cornea was gone. It was completely gone. My whole body started to change. In fact, my inner intestines and organs felt like they were getting stronger and stronger and stronger, to the point where I went to a spiritual teacher to ask about it. And he just said, well, of course, that's something that happens as you develop more spiritually. Your body becomes stronger. And, I realized I slept better. I didn't have anxiety or stress. I could just accept whatever was happening more easily. I certainly went through many years of, experiences. I was married 3 times. I wrote my book, Secrets of a Metaphysical Flight Attendant, where I talk about all the things I went through. I flew for 35 years as a crew member, a flight attendant. So I had a lot of experiences all over the world. But that shift, when I had that awakening experience, that STE, Spiritually Transformative Experience, nothing was the same after that. I almost felt like maybe I was a walk-in when I read that book, which was written by a psychic about walk-ins. I began to think maybe that's what happened to me. But I think what happens is once you have that awakening from some sort of experience in your life that just shifts you to a different level of consciousness, what happens is you become tapped into your higher self, which is connected to your soul. It is your soul. And that is connected to the whole universe, the higher consciousness of the planet, higher intelligence. So you're able to be more creative. You're able to get that inner guidance. Your intuition kicks in when you need it. I wrote about it in my book, that I was still flying in 2001, number one purser in Boston with United Airlines, which was the second plane to hit the tower. And I had bid that flight, but I changed it in the computer after a conversation I had. It was like my higher self kind of guided me to go and get away from that flight 175. And I'm grateful for that. But I retired a year after that, after that terrible event. Your intuition, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, will guide you. I've talked before about how I heard this male voice over to the left that has guided me a number of times in my life, and it's given me the right advice. It told me to do certain things at certain times, and they turned out to be absolutely correct. Now, I don't know if that's my higher self or if it's a guide. They say we have guides around us in this human experience. If you study the teachings of Jesus, you also know that that Christ consciousness is always with you once you have your breakthrough, because like Jesus said, you can do the same things that I'm doing and even more. He meant that for everyone. We all have supernatural powers. We are all multidimensional beings. I have learned that this avatar that is my physical body, that is living in this physical dimension, is only a small part of who I really am. When I really go within and I contemplate life and the universe and the teachings of all the great mystics, I begin to realize that we are truly eternal. We are so much more than just flesh and blood. The reality is, we were never born and we will never die. We're eternal. So we don't have to worry about the outcome in this life because it's all going to be good. Um, I'm convinced of that. And I'm also convinced that, if you are getting ready to leave the dimension, I truly believe it's probably painless for most of you, because when we transition, we leave our body, and look at all the near-death experiencers that have gone to the other side, come back because of, medical ingenuity that we have in the times we're living in or whatever. They just got a glimpse on the other side or a big dose of it, and they all say the same thing. It's more real than real in this dimension. And they were so happy to be over there, and they felt no pain when they transitioned. And, it's a wonderful thing when you wake up and realize there's nothing to fear. We're safe, we're connected, we're never alone, and we're living in the most amazing time ever because every day we learn something new could possibly be happening on this planet with the human race and the progression of it. Maybe, one of my favorite mystics, Jose Silva, was told in 1998 that we have moved into the next phase of human evolution. That's why we're seeing people that do have psychic gifts, healing gifts. They've always been around, but maybe we'll see more and more people communicating on this level and helping each other in a very positive situation, win-win situation, healing each other, lifting each other up in conversation and sharing insights into how it all works because we all have our own certain experiences. That's why I try to share with you on my videos what I've experienced because I love to hear other people's stories. It's so enlightening and uplifting. If I hadn't met a man who told me how he was healed through prayer of a brain tumor, I never would have known how to go to a practitioner and find that answer that I needed when I was told I needed surgery or I would die. And I'm so grateful that he came to me with his story out of the blue. I just ran into him one day down on the street in Tiburon, California. And I remember him standing there telling me what happened to him. He was so excited about it and thrilled. And it had been quite a while since he'd had his healing. So he knew it was real. And I was able to use his information to benefit myself. And that's why I try to share with you how you can heal yourself. You can overcome anxiety and stress if you really want to. If you go to my website, rebeccatripp.com, I promise you'll be able to find some information there that might be helpful.